In the previous episode, we left Lewin finding more information about Draka, and it was all thanks to Kingram. On top of that, our MC also managed to hatch an incarnation that could transform into anything. Sounds fishy, right? Now, this summoned pet named Strang is in the form of a tiny little bear. Let's find out more about him, shall we? Lewin asked the bear how he was talking. The bear got mad and asked if he could hear him. The bear told him, "How dare you compare me to those things? I'm not a bear." So it prompted Lewin to ask what it is. The bear replied that he's an incarnation, that he can be anything that he wishes to be. He told Lewin to watch since he'll demonstrate his power. Lewin watched intently. The bear trembled as he gave his best. The bear was surprised and confused as he asked where his power went. Lewin also wondered what this bear was doing. The bear told him that it must be because he reincarnated with an empty stomach. He demanded Lewin to give him food. In his mind, Lewin thought of the bear as rude. Lewin told the bear that there's no food there, and he expressed that he doesn't even know what the bear can eat. The bear was taken aback that Lewin can't even get him food. He asked why his master this time was so weak. Lewin asked if he's the master that the bear is pertaining to. The bear laid down on his palm and requested Lewin to wake him up when it's time to eat. Deep inside, Lewin was confused with this bear for calling him master, yet describing him as weak. Kingram was amused how it had been thousands of years, and the bear's personality is still the same. He told Lewin that seeing Lewin with Strang reminded him of the old days. It reminds him of Strang and Draka, whom he faced back in his old hometown, the Skypeak tribe. Then Kingram asked Lewin Ardell, the small destroyer who carries Draka's will, on what he planned to do now. Lewin replied, "About what?" Kingram told him that the power that he will possess will make him stronger, and it might lead him to the right way, or eat him alive. So Kingram asked Lewin again that if he gets stronger, what does he plan to do? It made Lewin reflect and recall that the reason he wanted power is to protect his people from demons, to evoke the name Ardell, and to properly proclaim his name to those who contempt him. Those thoughts made Lewin smile and content. He realized that he has a lot to protect to give up the opportunity. He answered Kingram saying, "I'll live on my own will, for my people, family, and myself." Kingram was satisfied with his answer, and he looked forward to the future that Lewin will bring. Lewin finally got a clue about Draka through the help of Kingram. Yet, as usual, his day started with a quest. The only thing that has changed is that now he has a companion. He woke up Strang and asked if he's going to eat. Strang immediately lit up and drooled upon hearing the word food. Lewin feeds Strang, since that guy is crazy about food, and it eats a lot. The food that Strang eats is the power that he gets from the quests. Basically, Strang feeds off on Lewin's power. A blue window displayed details of Strang. Strang is an incarnation of strength. It's the only spirit in the physical world that responds to the most primitive essence of strength. And it gets stronger as the vessel grows stronger, sharing all with its vessel. It also displayed 1-star unique skill. Companion Strang's growth is shared with Lewin 100%. Unique skill Companion gives Lewin 100% strength, and the skill Companion from Strang accelerated Lewin's growth. Lewin asked Strang if he'll get extra 100 strength every time Strang got stronger. Strang explained that he could have 200 when Strang becomes 2 stars. It will increase by 100 when Strang's stars increase. Strang shared that before he was sealed, he was over 31 stars. Lewin was surprised. He computed it in his head, and 31 stars meant Draka had 3,100 strengths. He thought of his own strength. It's not even 1,000, but it already feels strong. That motivated Lewin to ask how Draka achieved that. He asked if there's another way to grow his strength besides the quest. Strang had an all-knowing laugh and boasted why that made him the greatest. Then Strang told him that if he wanted to know, he should get him a cup of water. But Lewin had an intimidating response to that. He told Strang that he doesn't have to tell him unless he wants to starve. That left Strang with no choice but to tell him. There are many ways to obtain power. One example is through a higher difficulty quest to get better rewards. Another one is to craft an item that gives strength, or at least find an artifact. It's also an option to boil the ogre's tendon and make an elixir. But Strang told Lewin that none of those are meant for him. Lewin was curious why when there's so many options available. Strang told him that he needs to have at least 1,000 strength to do all of those. If not, his body won't be able to handle the power that will grow exponentially. Strang described Lewin as similar to a baby who's learning their first step. That made Lewin realize that he's still at the beginning when all this time he thought he got stronger. He made it his goal to achieve 1,000 strength. He pushed through with the training that he had been doing. He did that every day to increase his strength, and when his strength reached 930, after some time, the third trial, Real Combat, started. Strang rode his shoulders and asked if his combat trial was today. Lewin looked excited. He told Strang that he had been looking forward to that day. Normally, magicians attack from the back line, so there's a possibility that the spell might hit allies in the chaos. So, the purpose of the Real Combat trial is to test a magician's risk management skills, and it's the most important trial out of all. A student released a fireball, the knights panicked and told him not to aim at them. That was Jason Damon, and the instructor just told him that he's out. Jason was dispirited. The Foldrin Knights are there to help with the test to ensure the student's safety and test their synergy with them. The trial goes on for 10 days, and each student will get monsters based on their scores. There were a total of 13 high-score students on the last day. Since it's the last day of the trial, everyone was curious about what kind of monster would show up. The students panicked at the sound of loud noise. An orc appeared. Orcs live in groups all around the continent. They are much bigger than humans, and their intelligence is comparable too. They have a violent nature that causes frequent wars with humans. One scared student questioned if it's really okay for the test. Another student was worried that someone would die from an orc. Professor Heidel reminded them that they're magicians, so they should always remain rational. He told the students to consider it real and give their best. The orc charged at them. Its fist hit the shield of the knights. The magician at the back formed several blue balls, and he released it as an ice arrow. But the orc moved from its position. The knights and the magician were surprised to see it above them. Professor Heidel told the magician, Mikkel, to dodge. Mikkel trembled in fear. He knew he had to retaliate, but his body won't move because of fear. Professor Heidel used his prison tree ability. Vines appeared from the ground, and it wrapped around the orc to immobilize it. Fortunately, this happened just before it reached Mikkel. The instructor announced that Mikkel Garyhill is out. Someone punched his own thigh. It was Professor Elric, and he's disappointed that Mikkel failed again. That prompted Professor Elric to mess with Lewin's test. He asked the dean if he would still continue the ongoing trial. The dean was confused on what Professor Elric meant. He knew it was Lewin's turn soon. Professor Elric confirmed that. He also shared that Lewin is the only student who got a perfect score from Kingram, and he expressed that testing the other students the same way as Lewin is unfair. The dean acknowledges his point, but they don't have any other monster prepared. Professor Elric informed the dean that they have another one. He narrated that when the Foldrin Knights brought the orcs, they also brought one ogre. Professor Elric admitted that using an ogre on the trial is very dangerous, but he also said that with Professor Heidel in there, along with the knights. Professor Elric couldn't help his curiosity on what Lewin is capable of. Moments later, in the hallway of the academy, Professor Heidel is waiting for Lewin to pass by. Professor Heidel called him, and Lewin acknowledged the presence of the professor. The professor has something to say to him before the trial. Professor Heidel gave him a heads up that he will be tested harder than the others. The professor revealed to him that the academy is expecting a lot from him since he got a perfect score from Kingram. Because of that, some were saying that it's unfair for Lewin to fight the same monster as the normal students, and that's why his trial will be harder than the others. Our MC asked the professor how it would be harder. The professor shared to him that he'll be fighting a different monster, not an orc. Professor Heidel revealed to him that he'll be fighting against an ogre. Lewin and Strang were flabbergasted. Then Strang uttered how Lewin's first real opponent is an ogre. He expressed that it looked like it would be fun. In another setting, a monster is trying to break free from the chains. It looked menacing, and it roared loudly. Jason asked his classmate if it's an orc captain. The student replied that it's an ogre. Upon hearing that, Jason got worried. A knight gripped his sword tightly while thinking that the only reason he brought it is because he was asked to. But in his opinion, An ogre shouldn't be used against students for test purposes. That made him wonder how strong the student is. An ogre looked similar to an orc, but it's much stronger than it. Ogres can crack a skull or twist a spine on a single swing. A knight asked Professor Heidel if he's sure about it, especially since the ogre is difficult to capture even with their help. Professor Heidel responded firmly that he's sure about it since it's the dean's orders. The knight, with a hint of aggression, commented how Professor Heidel puts his life on the line for the test in the academy. A person replied that he will put his life on the line. The knight asked this person who he was. He introduced himself as Lewin Ardell, the student for the trial. The knight couldn't believe that it's the student who will go against the ogre. He believed that there's no way a student can go against that ogre. The knight was thinking how he and the professor will protect this student, but he was confused when Lewin passed through him. That made him wonder where Lewin was going. The knight told Lewin that he's going the wrong way. And this knight asked Lewin what he was doing. Lewin replied that he's getting ready for the trial. The knight told him that he's in the wrong position because he should be at the back. Our MC informed that knight that it is where he will fight. The knight got confused. With a determined expression, Lewin told the knight that his spells are quite different. The knight gets slightly annoyed as he informs Lewin that they can't protect him if he's in front of them. He reminded Lewin that the monster is not as easy as an orc. Lewin replied that he knew about that. The knight had furrowed brows when he asked Lewin why he was doing that with his life. Lewin took off his jacket, and he replied to the knight, "I'm desperate." The knight observed Lewin as Lewin positioned himself. He admitted to himself that he couldn't sense any fear from Lewin. That made him think that Lewin is different. Professor Heidel instructed Lewin to get ready. Then the professor announced the commencement of Lewin's trial. The ogre was released from its chains, and it immediately charged towards the humans. The knights were positioned in front of Lewin, and they had prepared their shields. But to their surprise, Lewin charged ahead. The knight panicked. He tried to stop Lewin. He wondered what Lewin's plan was. The ogre let out a loud, terrifying noise as it lifted its arm. As a response to that, Lewin leapt. And when he's close to the ogre, he releases a fireball. Their fists met at the center. People were surprised that Lewin fought this monster head-on. The knight was astonished when Lewin used a close combat spell in that situation. Professor Heidel tried to keep watch even if the flame and smoke made it difficult to see. The other students protected their eyes as well. Even Professor Elric and the dean were surprised. The smoke blocked the vision of everyone. The knight hoped that Lewin wasn't dead. When the smoke cleared, he saw Lewin's figure. He was shocked to see that Lewin is still alive. He wondered how Lewin was still standing. Meanwhile, Professor Heidel is grinning. I bet he had already expected this to happen. The knight taps Lewin's shoulder. He scolded Lewin because Lewin should have informed him beforehand. He yelled, "You almost died there." Lewin apologized, but he asked if the knight would still allow him to do that if he informed him ahead of time. The knight was taken aback with that question. Lewin told him that they should finish the trial first. The ogre was angry and it looked terrifying. The knight asked Lewin to step back for now since it's dangerous. He instructed Lewin to sit still until he finished taking care of the ogre. But Lewin stepped forward. He positioned himself in front of the knight. He declared to the knight that it was his trial. With a stern expression, he uttered, "Let me finish my trial." Lewin looked at the ogre that's 5 times bigger than him, and then he charged towards the ogre. There were 2 reasons why he felt brave, one of which is because of his skill, the ogre's friend. It's the title that he got from Kingram that lets him talk to ogres. He understood what the ogre was screaming about. Earlier, it told him not to come near him, and it demanded to be released. The ogre looked like a furious monster to normal people, but not to Lewin. He understood that the ogre was scared of being surrounded by a bunch of magicians and knights. Second reason is that Lewin got a sudden request. It was an urgent quest to fight an enemy that he can't avoid. Lewin was tasked to subdue the enemy faster than others. There were 2 objectives. First is to strike the enemy first. The second objective is to defeat the enemy. The reward for this is +30 strength and a skill called Player's Eye. It was a great reward for someone like Lewin, who had to repeat the same quest every day. It was 3 days' worth of strength in one quest. That's when he took off, since he had no reason to hesitate. His fist met the ogre's. His flame engulfed the arm of the ogre. It was a huge flame. With that, Lewin had completed the first objective. But it's not over yet. The ogre told him that he would kill him. The ogre jumped really high. They anticipated the impact of the attack. The ogre screamed that it would crush Lewin's head. Fortunately, Lewin was able to evade on time. He decided to look for its weak point. Lewin used time refraction. The knight was surprised. He wondered how Lewin is so fast. Lewin wanted to get close to the ogre. He charged ahead and aimed at the ogre's weak point. The knight was astonished at how Lewin is not hesitating in facing off the ogre. The students wondered what was happening. Then they saw that the ogre had fought back. It raised its fist against Lewin, who also did the same thing. Lewin also hit the ogre's arm using his knee. The ogre got a hold of Lewin, and it threw Lewin in the air. Lewin had adjusted his body and was able to control how he would land, but he was taken aback. The ogre suddenly threw a powerful punch. Fortunately, he was quick to evade it. The ogre was so furious that it called Lewin a rat. Lewin leapt up high. While in the air, he positioned his legs, and he kicked the ogre. It was powerful enough to make the ogre fall to the ground with a loud impact. Lewin landed and stepped on its chest. He decided to end the fight soon. He used the skill Ogre's Fur to increase his strength for 30 seconds. The ogre asked him if he's even a human, and when Lewin uttered, "You didn't expect me to answer, right?" The ogre was in total shock. Just to confirm, the ogre asked Lewin if he can really understand what he's saying. In return, Lewin confirmed if it can understand him too. That made the ogre angrier, but Lewin did not even let it have time to do it because he used Explosion Mana Burn right on its chest, and the ogre's fury effect was stacked. The system informed Lewin of the change to Berserk status. It caused a massive explosion. By the time Lewin's flame dissipates, the ogre had already been knocked out. Our MC slowly stood up and wondered if his attack had sealed the deal. Strang, on the other hand, commented that Lewin is better than he expected. While looking at Lewin, the students couldn't believe their eyes. Then they cheered and praised Lewin. Professor Elric was flabbergasted that Lewin actually won, while the dean is delighted. The knights checked out the ogre's body. They couldn't believe that it was possible for Lewin to defeat the ogre all by himself. The knight that scolded Lewin earlier asked on from whom did he learn the spell and physical skill. Lewin replied that there's no one who taught him. The knight was suspicious that Lewin learned that by himself, but Lewin was firm on what he said. Then Lewin asked Professor Heidel to announce the result of his trial. The professor was silent for quite some time. Then he shared that he honestly thought Lewin wouldn't be able to do it, but Lewin didn't even give him a chance to stop him. He told Lewin that Lewin exceeded his expectations, and the professor announced that he passed. Everybody cheered for Lewin. Lewin had a great smile on his face. The blue window displayed that the quest was completed, and Lewin received the reward. Lewin was a bit overwhelmed with what he got. The player's eye gives him the ability to see through the nature of everything, and with it, he can sense stealth and track invisibility. Strang looked proud, and he commented how Lewin is starting to become a real player. Lewin asked him if he knew that skill. Strang informed him that it's something that only a player can have. He explained that enemies hiding using stealth or invisibility magic will look different in Lewin's eyes. He will be able to perceive them with a faint outline. Lewin commented how it's pretty useful, and then the blue window displayed that Minimap has been unlocked. With it, he can see everything within a 500-meter radius around him. Because of that, he can view the status window of the desired target, and information that is available to be viewed depends on the target's level. Strang looked happy with it and told our MC that there are more surprises. Strang instructed Lewin to look at the fallen ogre and activate the player's eye. Lewin did as he was told. He was surprised when the blue window appeared. He saw the target's condition, which states that the ogre in front of him is a shoulder blade ogre with 3 stars. Lewin was impressed with his new skill. He decided to try it out on Professor Heidel. It displayed that the professor is a 6th-class magician, and other information is not yet accessible to Lewin. He told Strang how the information was limited. Strang explained that it's because he can't get information about people who are on a higher level than him. Strang told him that as he gets stronger, the information available to view will increase. That made Lewin smirk. After the real combat test had ended, rumors spread throughout the academy about Lewin defeating the ogre. Jason asked him how he felt about everyone talking about him. He replied that it's new to him, so he doesn't know how to feel about it. All of a sudden, a woman approached him. This gentle-looking woman asked if he's Lewin. Then several other women appeared. They expressed how awesome Lewin is, and they gave him gifts. When they stepped away from Lewin, they all squealed. Lewin asked Jason if he wanted the snacks. Jason was utterly surprised. Jason scolded Lewin and told him that the act is disrespectful to the lady who overcame her embarrassment and packed lunch for him. Lewin asked him why he was the one getting worked up. While looking at the puppy jealousy face of Jason, a blue window displayed that Jason Damon is a second-class magician with a high potential. For the past few days, Lewin had been checking out everyone's status, and only Jason showed high potential. In a serious tone, Lewin told his friend to try a little bit harder, and he'll do great on the next test. Jason was confused by the random sympathy from Lewin. Lewin explained that he's not sympathizing with him. He told Jason that he's just saying that he had a high potential. He also encouraged Jason by saying that Jason's skills are great, so he should regain his confidence and work harder. Jason replied, "Really?" Lewin answered yes and advised him to not just play. That motivated Jason to be in the top 10. Funnily and honestly, Lewin replied that it's a difficult goal. Jason asked Lewin if he's being real because sometimes he couldn't just believe him. Lewin asked him what he meant. Jason explained that he's wondering if he's the same Lewin that he had known and was close to for the past 6 years. In his head, Lewin admitted that sometimes he couldn't believe it too, so he understood Jason on that part. Jason also told him that there had been rumors around Lewin, and the rumors state that Lewin will be able to push past against Michael Garyhill and become not only the Valedictorian, but also the representative of the Academy. Lewin replied that he doesn't care about that, and he invited Jason to head inside. Jason couldn't believe that he doesn't care when it's the year of the Grand Festival. In the 5th month of every year, representatives from famous academies come together and a Magic Festival is held to decide who is superior amongst themselves. And once every 8 years, the Olympiad gathers all the magicians to determine the greatest magician. When the two events overlap, it is called the Grand Festival. The Grand Festival is a national competition for the brightest students from the most famed academies. The winner of the Grand Festival and their academy not only receives a large sum of money, but they also can receive various privileges. That's why there is a limit to how many students can compete. 1 student for individual competitions and 30 students for group competitions. A total of the 31 best students in the academy can compete. And the one who competes during the individual competition becomes the academy's representative. Inside the cafeteria, students started to wonder who would become the representative for that year. One student wondered if it would be Michael again. Jason replied that it will be Lewin. Another student's second demotion, since Lewin is the only student who received 100 points from Kingram. And Jason reminded everyone about Michael's performance during the times that he attended the festival. Students recalled that Michael flunked the group competition and placed 4th of 5 during the individual competition. And that is why their academy had been labeled as Last Academy, which meant that it's the last place academy where the students can't even compete individually or as a team. One student mentioned that the only way for them to escape the nickname is with Lewin. They asked Lewin what he thought about it. Lewin replied that the test isn't over yet. He knew that it's too early to be confident and excited. In the end, the one who participates during the Grand Festival is based on the first semester test scores and recommendations from the professors. And the 4th test, the 1v1 with Mikkel, is still coming up. And that's why Lewin needed to focus on the next test. After all he can think about is beating up Michael. 4 days after the 3rd test, the real combat test, Lewin continued his hellish training and has finally attained 1,000 strength. He had obtained the title, "Preparations Are Over." Strang was excited since he waited for this day to come. He asked Lewin if he's ready to start leveling up now. The blue window displayed that repeatable quest has been upgraded to level 2. Strang leapt and positioned himself on Lewin's shoulder. The window informed Lewin that the difficulty of the repeatable quest doubles, while the reward triples. Strang was just like Kirby at this point. He's sucking everything. Then he gulped down Lewin's powers, and he exudes a powerful aura around him. The flame was so powerful that it lightened up the whole area. Lewin wondered what that flame was. And then he recognized something. Meanwhile, Professor Elric was in deep thoughts. He recalled how Lewin ended the ogre, and Professor Elric realized that he actually ended up helping that guy. He wondered if Lewin Ardell could now face Mikkel and be able to win. But he assumed that the victory was unlikely. If that happens, it could jeopardize Mikkel's place at the Grand Festival and even weaken his position as Valedictorian. He wanted the Garyhill family to be at the top of the academy no matter what. Back to Lewin and Strang. The incarnation of strength, Strang has advanced to rank 2, and Lewin received Plow 200 strength. Lewin noticed that Strang had grown a lot. He asked what happened since it's also thanks to Strang that Lewin's strength reached 1200 quickly. Strang stood with pride and a smiling face. Strang confidently announced that it was just the start. He also guessed that the difficulty and rewards had increased. They both checked the status window. It states, the repeatable quest is at level 2. This means that Lewin had matured to a basic level of body strength required for battle. However, his training continues. Now his goal is to reach 5,000 punch, kick, spin kick, and 15-kilometer run, plus 1 real battle training. Completing this would give him a reward of plus 30 strength. Lewin uttered that he had already been doing the increased amount of training, so it wouldn't be too difficult. But he inquired to Strang about the real combat training. Strang replied that he is capable of becoming anything. Lewin remembered that Strang told him that. So Strang explained that from now on, he can transform into anything, but there's a limit. Lewin asked if Strang could transform into human form. Strang replied that he could do it when he reached rank 5. However, transforming into a human perfectly is going to be difficult. So Lewin asked what he could transform into. That made Strang smile and asked if he wanted to see. There was a gush of wind around Strang. He became a tornado, and it grew bigger as he completed the transformation. When it was complete, it revealed a terrifying scarecrow. Strang asked why Lewin's reaction was like that. Lewin replied that it was because what he had seen was something different from what he expected. Strang told him not to look down on scarecrows. He asked if Lewin had any idea on how helpful Strang is when he first started to do real training with Draca. Lewin asked if Strang is the dummy during that real training. Strang replied yes, and to be exact, he's the buddy for Lewin's quest. So Lewin asked to clarify if it meant that he will be doing real combat training with Strang every day. Strang replied yes. Strang replied that since he's weak, he's only at the level of a third-class magician. But with a devilish look, Strang announced that when he regains his strength again, anything is possible. If Lewin would desire, Strang could even be a demon or a dragon. Lewin decided to start training. Strang asked him what he would like him to turn into. Lewin replied that he should be a magician. That triggered a dark, devilish, yet excited look from the bear. This summoned pet gathered its power towards its paw. Strang brought out his staff. He informed Lewin that if his magic hits Lewin, it will only cause a knockback and cannot inflict damage. Lewin asked what it is like for Strang. Strang announced that he will not take any damage. Now Lewin sees Strang as the perfect training partner. Then Strang made the first attack. It was a powerful fireball, but Lewin was able to evade immediately. While evading, Lewin thought of Mikkel, that Mikkel could also be training like him, and that made Lewin excited for the day of the test. On the other hand, Mikkel called his uncle. He admitted that the son of a bitch is making him mad. So, he asked for his uncle's advice on what he should do about it. His loser uncle scolded him and told him that he was just a bit stronger. But Mikkel told his uncle that he has no right to be talking that way right now, since there are rumors around him, that he's the one who raised Lewin's grades up. It was because it's his uncle's idea to make Lewin face against an ogre. Mikkel was mad. He blamed his uncle for making Lewin get the best score. He informed his uncle that if their family found out about it, he's sure that things won't look for him. This made Professor Elric furious, since it felt like Mikkel blackmailed him. So Mikkel told him to stop spewing nonsense and just think of a way to fix the situation. Mikkel was worried that Lewin could become the Academy's representative at the Grand Festival. Professor Elric expressed that it was unacceptable. Professor Elric gave him a bottle. Mikkel was surprised to see the Herb of Awakening, the burning flower. The Herb of Awakening burning flower grows in the northern lands of hallucination. It is a rare and precious medicinal herb, and some people use it to create special elixirs. Professor Elric told Mikkel that if he drinks that, it will cause an awakening effect, and it can drastically reduce mana casting times. But Mikkel knew that the side effect is to make the person forget about pain and make it hard to distinguish friend and foe. Professor Elric told him he's correct. Basically, the drink will make him unable to see anything. He commented how Mikkel is paying attention to his classes since he knew about it. Mikkel clarified if the professor wanted him to drink it. Professor Elric replied yes. Michael's initial reaction was to ask if his uncle is crazy. Professor Elric asked him if he should be complaining when he lost to that guy and he would eventually be kicked out of the family for bringing shame. Mikkel was nervous because it was risky. He's aware that Professor Heidel knew his exact limit, and if that professor notices any changes, he'll catch on. His uncle reminded him that he's in charge of the drug testing, so he gave Mikkel another vial, and that contains a potion that will conceal the fact that he took the herb. He instructed Mikkel to drink the purple vial after using the burning flower. He told Mikkel not to be afraid because they are Gary Hills, and it's their way of getting ahead. Professor Elric asked Mikkel if he's going to do it or not. Mikkel doesn't look pleased. Finally, the day of the 1v1 combat test had arrived. The location of the test is the Mana Barrier Hall. Every year during the 1v1 combat test, the entire test site becomes packed, and the last fight had begun. It was between Mikkel and Lewin. Lewin walked to the center. It's the day that he had been waiting for. The face, off against Mikkel. Strang told him that the opponent knows that Lewin will probably engage in close combat, and if that opponent had prepared for that, it will become difficult for Lewin. It was funny how both of them had their sinister smiles when Lewin asked what if he approached the guy, and Strang replied, "Yeah, just one punch is needed." The instructor informed that for the test to be as close to a real combat as possible, there were various geographical features placed. The instructor asked if they were ready. They replied yes. Lewin noticed something. He looked at Mikkel and figured out that Mikkel's condition isn't normal. Mikkel was breathing heavily as if he's in rage. Lewin also observed that Mikkel is not as arrogant as usual, which made him think that something is off. He decided to check using the player's eye. It activated, and the status window says that Michael Garyhill is a third-class magician with high potential and double casting feature. There's also the special condition called Berserk, hidden. It's the first time that Lewin encountered Berserk. And on top of that, it says hidden. It made him wonder if Mikkel took something to hide his use of drugs. Before the test, there was a drug test, but Lewin realized that the professor in charge of the testing was Professor Elric. So, he thought of the possibility that Michael's uncle, Professor Elric, made Michael take something and helped him get away with it. The instructor told them that the only magic banned in the spar is the black magic. All magic based on the 4 elements are allowed, and the instructors consider the level of magic that hits the opponent to measure the score. The instructor advised them not to worry about the opponent since, inside the Mana Barrier Hall, the effectiveness of magic is reduced by 99%. The instructor asked if they had any questions. Lewin had one, so the instructor allowed him to speak. Then Lewin asked what would happen if someone is found to have taken an illegal potion. Mikkel was surprised to hear that. The instructor explained that if that happens, the student will forfeit their right to take the test and will be considered failed. Also, depending on the severity, an examination to determine expulsion could also proceed. The instructor asked Lewin why he asked that. Lewin didn't say anything, but he gave Mikkel a knowing look. The students were instructed to get into their positions. Lewin knew that what he had right now was just an assumption. Since he's the only one who can see it through his status window, nobody would believe him. He needed to find solid evidence. They were both in position, and the instructor announced, "Begin!" These two didn't waste any second, and they immediately charged at each other. Mikkel made a powerful green orb of magic while yelling for Lewin to die, and it caused vines to wrap on Lewin's leg. But it was easy for Lewin to slice it up. The students were surprised that he did that easily. They wondered if Mikkel's spell did not work on him. It was great for Lewin since the Mana Barrier Hall reduced the strength of magic, but not his own strength. He ran towards Mikkel. Mikkel summoned a skull that breathed flame, and he attacked Lewin with fire breath. It was followed by haste, which Lewin skillfully dodged. Lewin kept running, and fortunately, he was able to hide behind a boulder when the flame engulfed the area. While hiding behind that boulder, he tried to observe Mikkel. He figured out that reduced casting times and increased mana collection are the effects of Mikkel's potion. Mikkel taunted him to come out. Lewin also noticed that Mikkel is more worked up than usual, and from those data, he was able to determine what Mikkel had intake. He figured out that it was the herb of awakening, burning flower. He also noticed Mikkel's shaky hands, excessive excitement, suppression of pain receptors, and lowered ability to distinguish between a friend and foe. So, it all adds up. Mikkel continued to lure him out. Lewin knew that the only thing left was pain suppression. Our MC came out and told Mikkel that it was no wonder that Mikkel is so confident. It's because of that. Mikkel asked what he meant. Lewin uttered, "burning flower." Mikkel was taken aback. Lewin told him that it doesn't matter because he himself wouldn't be needing something like that, just to defeat Mikkel. He informed Mikkel that he's coming for him. Lewin used time refraction. Mikkel struggled because Lewin was too fast. This loser tried to block Lewin's way by placing an ice wall, but it was no use. Lewin shattered the ice wall with his powerful kick. The professors were surprised. The students wondered if that was even magic. They couldn't believe that Lewin rushed into Mikkel in just one go, but Mikkel fought back. He summoned a gigantic salamander that breathed fire. This attack is a third-class magic, and it was a fire lizard. To counter that, Lewin clenched his fist and used earthquake. He punched the ground and it shattered. It created a hole, deep enough for the fire lizard to fall into. The students were amused with how Lewin countered the fire element using the earth element. Mikkel lost balance. He fell on his butt and screamed when Lewin loomed over him. Lewin prepared his finger while telling Mikkel not to be a pussy and take it. Mikkel was confused and he stared at the finger, but that finger was packed with enormous power. A few seconds later, the whole stadium shook as a loud kaboom was heard all over the place. That deafening sound came from our MC's last attack, a forehead fucking flick. All of the students that were present inside the stadium had their mouths wide open in shock. Dust around the area has now started to settle. Lewin noticed something in front of him, and that was Mikkel, who was still conscious even after receiving the attack. This loser also claimed that Lewin was looking down on him. He was about to whine about that forehead flick, but Lewin had already followed the attack with a powerful punch. He continued to perform a barrage of punches while pushing Mikkel back, and after a few more hits, Mikkel was finally down again. But even then, he was still conscious. His body was already trembling from the damage he received, but Mikkel still managed to laugh. He even boasted and claimed that Lewin's punches were too soft. Our MC knew that it was dangerous to let things like this, so he tapped Mikkel's shoulders and casted a spell called Binding Tree. Green vines appeared and held Mikkel in his place. Lewin then raised his hand to get the attention of the professors. He then told them Mikkel used a forbidden drug. The battle was stopped, and a professor approached Lewin. He was asked if he was sure because if he was just lying, he would be disqualified. Lewin was confident and told them that he was sure because one can make a drug that can't be detected in tests any time. He even added that someone could even turn a blind eye to it. The professor then knew what Lewin was talking about. Our MC commented that someone who could handle multiple rare materials to his heart's content and conduct the test before the match would be the culprit. Both of them turned their gazes to Professor Elric, and that made him wary. Lewin's statement made the students realize that he has a point because Professor Elric was Mikkel's uncle, and upon hearing that, Professor Elric disappeared from his seat. He came down and approached Lewin. Professor Elric wanted to deny what our MC had said. He couldn't believe that a student would really think that he would give his nephew some drugs and then turn a blind eye to it. But then, Lewin just smiled and told everyone that he even has proof. Professor Elric panicked for a bit and then suggested that they should just conduct another drug test. But Lewin told him that there's no need for that, especially when they have already used special elixir to hide the symptoms. This loser was already becoming more edgy. He asked Lewin what he wanted to propose. Lewin approached a huge trunk of a tree and told everyone that he'll show Professor Elric directly what he meant. Gigachad Lewin made an attack and it blasted the entire trunk of the tree, and it was just by using his fingers. He then revealed that the attack that everyone just saw was the same finger flick that he did on Mikkel earlier. This revelation made Professor Elric's body tremble. Lewin added that even if Mikkel's magic was higher than normal due to practice, that loser kept on laughing and being awake after being hit with that attack. In his current condition, his skull would be wobbling, and at least 4 ribs would have been broken. But even then, he's still laughing. It was as if he couldn't feel any pain. Lewin asked this professor again if he still wanted to deny it. But Elric just kept his silence, and that only meant one thing. The dean then finally made his move and called out Professor Elric's name in front of everyone. The old man was oozing with anger and disappointment. He couldn't believe that a professor would dare to commit such a thing in this sacred testing ground. The dean addressed Elric and commanded him to follow the old man in his office. This loser knew he fucked up. Big time. Meanwhile, Lewin just watched Professor Elric exit the place, and even after all that happened, Mikkel was still laughing and high. After that, the 4th test passed like a storm. The hallways of the academy were filled with news that Professor Elric was fired and Mikkel was expelled. The corruption of the Gary Hill family was also laid out in the open. Our MC also gained a new nickname, which was Expulsion Maker. We then see Lewin standing in front of this huge-ass door. His body started to be enveloped by light, and that was because he was summoned by the dean. In his mind, he didn't know what to expect, and after a few seconds, he was finally transported to another place. His eyes widened as he realized where he was. In front of him was a familiar place. It was none other than the Ardell territory. A luxurious red chair was also placed right in the middle of the fields. Lewin came to his senses that it was not his home because it's a bit different. As he looked around intently, he finally noticed something. The red chair is the throne of Teron, where the king of magicians sits. He then wondered what it was doing there. His thoughts were interrupted when the dean appeared and asked him what he saw. While following the old man, Lewin found out that this place was created independently by the Eye of Malarok. Our MC had heard about it. Malarok is the name of the leader of the demons that first invaded the Frelia continent. They say that he had the power to force a target to have visions of what they desired the most, but after the demise of this demon, his body parts were produced into artifacts. The dean told Lewin that the Eye of Malarok showed him the world he wanted to see. In short, it was like the infinite Tsukuyomi of Madara. Lewin then realized why he saw his family's territory and the chair of the king, and that was because he wanted to revive their glory and become the best magician. The dean also asked Lewin if he's not curious about what the dean sees inside this place. Our MC then inquired about it. With a relaxed expression, the old man revealed that he sees a world where students act like students and magicians act like magicians. Of course, that world won't be easy to achieve. And Lewin agreed to that. They now stood in front of another door. The huge door opened. But before going in, Lewin looked back once again. That's when he saw himself holding a trophy and was being cheered on by some students around him. Lewin also saw one instance where he graduated as the Valedictorian of the academy. These images gave him enough reason to smile. A few moments later, the two were now inside the dean's office. The old man offered our MC 1 cup of tea. Lewin thanked him for the kind gesture, and while sipping the tea, the dean just stared at him intently. The dean revealed the reason why Lewin was called here today. And that was for the dean to ask one question. With a curious look on his face, the dean inquired how Lewin was able to detect that Mikkel used the burning flower and other stimulants. Lewin became silent for a moment. He then answered that Mikkel's aura was quite different from the usual. He thought of the burning flower because Mikkel looked aggressive yet anxious. There's also an abnormal flow and amplification of his mana. The dean probed more why Lewin was more sure than suspicious. Our MC added that in his fight against Mikkel, he used physical strength and not magic. And that gave him the advantage because the barrier hole only controls magic and not strength. This was his alibi. Lewin thought that he didn't need to reveal that he had the player's eye. He continued by saying that even after all the damage Mikkel received, he still laughed. And that can only be explained by his use of the burning flower. The dean was already analyzing Lewin. He thought that this student was just 16, and yet possesses keen eyes to figure out changes like that against an opponent. He also noted his calm way of responding to situations. He then apologized because of the incident. The dean made sure that the Garyhill family will not be able to harm Lewin in any way. The old man also added that he has an offer to Lewin. He asked if he would join the Grand Festival in the 7th month this year as the Academy's representative, which shocked Lewin. He thought that the representative of the Grand Festival is a position that all students envy. That would also explain why he was personally called in the dean's office. Lewin closed his eyes while thinking what to say. He thanked the dean for the offer, but he mentioned that there's one problem, and that's experience. He revealed that he never had real battle experience for the last 5 years. Due to his Manhwa Evocation Disorder, he had an uneventful 5 years in the academy. He also doesn't know if he could compete against the geniuses that would appear in the Grand Festival. But his worries were shoved off as the dean told him that it won't be a problem at all. The dean claimed and assured him that Lewin is worthy of being called a winning candidate. On top of that, the dean told him one more scary thing about Lewin. The old man considered him as a secret weapon that appeared out of nowhere. Lewin didn't expect this and blushed. The dean added that to the other participants, Lewin would be a dark horse. Information about him doesn't exist, and they won't be familiar with the methods that could counter the magic that he uses. Lewin is becoming more thrilled. Their academy always placed last in the previous tournaments, and no one would even keep an eye on them. That means they'll be more easy to catch off guard. Our MC clenched his fist as the dean asked him again if he's interested in participating, and with great enthusiasm he exclaimed that he shall try his best as much as the dean trusted him. Our boy has finally received recognition and would even compete with geniuses. That's all the time we have for today. If you want to watch the next part, please like and subscribe. Thank you, and see you on to the next one.